is tro Microsoft Teams, fáidir a guléir a spícáidir bhilsiú, is ha in haniu níis a chláirich. Is mar a sábis bí sin toisc le úní sa mi doganna chu an húniche níos Morriston a tráiricha chu an úní. Tá le.
Lord our God, we thank you for this opportunity once again to come before you. We know that we are before you continually. You know our every move and our every being. And as we admire the creation around us in this past days and this past weeks, Lord, that we would behold the Creator, for you are the one who has created the universe and all that it contains. You are the light of this world, the light of heaven, and that you would shine on us with the light of thy countenance this day anew, Lord, and that we would come closer to you, that we could know that our walk is closer to you each day, for you are the one who will not leave us or forsake us, if we put our trust and confidence in you. We remember especially this day those who are less fortunate than we are, the many who may be suffering through illness, the many who are mourning, maybe those who are depressed for one reason or another, the many who are in difficulty through financial or whatever other reason, Lord. Commend them all to you. Remember the nations of this world also, where there is war, rumours of war. And Lord, we pray, and as we enjoy this tranquility here, we thank you for all that we have, even the breath that you give us, Lord, given unto us by you. We pray, Lord, especially for this council at this time. We pray for us from the Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, all the officers, Lord, who prepare all the reports for us. We commend each one to you for their diligence in their service. The chair of this committee for his diligence in this committee for many years, Lord. We appreciate that also. There are so many things in life that we appreciate that we take for granted. But Lord, we pray that we would make this the hour, for we do not know what a day or an hour may bring. This is the importance of this hour, Lord, that we could look on you through the lens of faith, that we could have confidence in you, the author and finisher of our faith. Bless us now, Lord, the rest of this day. Bless this committee and all that is done here, and all the other committees in the coming days. Go before us now and pardon us freely for our many sins. Amen.
Papelet, Aishin Morriston. Nisha Hashin goes the road, Nish Leshna Hashik Gilead York, it ha and ha Hanu Erobrachig, it's Teochig, have Microsoft Teams, the real Chinchimishwushin, so addiction let's go check. And a Giaver, Session Nisha Hashin Gobi goes at ha a crisper and nice as Jake that Gobi in all and a Giaver, Jerich, a Hanu. So now I could do my gory fudge at Emma James. Emma James is with the council doing work experience with the council for this week, and we welcome you to the committee and hope you enjoy your time with us. I'd just briefly like to update you also in terms of the meeting that was secured last week with the Cabinet Secretary Mary McGallan, the Deputy Leader, the Vice Chair and Deputy Chief Executive and myself met with the Cabinet Secretary regarding the HPMAs, and we reiterated the Council's position and opposition to the proposals in the strongest possible terms, and we hope we reflected the sense of alarm that has been felt throughout our communities regarding those proposals. It's still an ongoing consultation, which we appreciate, and we appreciated the time that the Cabinet Secretary gave us. She will be visiting the islands later on this month, I think, and we're hoping to continue that dialogue with her in terms of our concerns about the proposals. And she's hoping to meet with various people from the sector, especially from the processing sector here in Stornoway. I don't think there's anything else to add to that for the time being, but we'll keep you updated on that continued dialogue. Misschien was het niet zo hier kwetsbaar, zijn daar counters kan je goed jouw fiche kan juppelen, die jongens zijn zo'n eindiger. Wat je nog wat type one as een narisch tot donach so as niet jastig stank van een chronische shores morgens om tussen verkoen. Dan een kusbaar kwaar maar ha ik bouw aan een kusbaar semi de kwaar op begoor ja even schöne kwaar. Je femel ja niet weil in over biljart de kwaar zo kusbaar. Hierin buil zijn humerschen Janu en raste le wie kur hun microphones no Teams le we klechke gemhucht aan tokal waif. Gan of changeoch gebel schuif ganamachig ries dan een gusbar imichi as gebel schuif lentin klechkig maar gai wie nog gegrooi. Wil peil se bi kwarig ik in naam scho. Mis go kwarig aan een kusbar dich. Es gag wil mi na wou dat stormachs bi nier nech caroch gole nawing ha jun warsen as cogunig en hanu as jang huspersen. Nu is ik was er uit kusbare 3 wie nog Gianitus san as show is on fistrachus dat hoort ha schauwig urdes as Gianitus an een riaf keher le plannen griamachus sturig konschnokken as ha les ardofiker an de show is son brindisch en ask. Appelleis.
Mor an tain dir caroch ham riamachus brin me in de tarag hakins ha tertolachus go kanting gyle voor goed kai boanje tegen richet oanje a ha 3 dierak han a 3 dierak sin as an in het koach le 3 le sin de mi nog chia point 9 gerichet han a 3 taraget in sin as an natunie sin dochus gemiat eras taraget as a hier stal gan a blione show han as het mi nog na priamachus in weet gach sure was ar fastel en je met tot sin an het da nog ac verin are gusia point 3 dia carichet ar wil sin brin me een foskelich stre oprochuur ha nopersin le campaign as a roin a nuachgo ha sin fitin corm tot na campaign sin richele an a forum son Janet Change go let a coproch immer jaun ater na boeien agus gyfel sin je titch na planichen ake gyfel sin immerchi son naimlich heen guharait mastorsi at de tokal na kranen agus na project en ake. So we sin nog is tort asit aschone committee et de nastre honuen ma sin. Si seo asit meige blione agus hiisef giltount innovas son committee et point 9 teher. Ha sinne shout in genanite committee isteach daiche 3 míle ar horsoch ar budget so as an heim fashion sin bio ha mis mi noch gewsin ma hin isteach chofatte ar horsoch ar a budget ha mi tolly kutjoch gant in nach roteran semi an haar a gastal ha mi toen nach akelitchen il kar a tolly freket tiecht sepi.
Clear tapel lights. How? Yok Martian, Heuven Univers. Sonne a hammen a hakin a rast. Wil kish se bieg dinje. Ik da heim show. Man a hill. Waar wil u jes ik een humid show. Wil builen guntig nasik a hoort van jet. Dat beleid. Dus ik was het go kus bij de keer. Tijdens Rúskinoch skruútach targetjin manaki tijdens skier. En as seo Comhairle ri priavamas aan son in Eimri Tsjech program nog gewoon son tijdens ik wil prijs naterog. Is ik huis ik kan je ik hoogvingers waar natuurlijk. Berkeke wil je oplocht tijdens een huis ik ga nu regeerd wagen over ook als wij dan vader kunnen gewoon primages hoort door medige target in nuas en wein riotes na hawape wie was het eruit projecten aan een skiere maniki tijdens journalmak als ik in een naam met Janet Change gewil lesige als tokal y gafel age an y sgira marigi yn hwyr. Oes Brini Ian Watson dysgu ask oes ffraglia cystion sybi.
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, this is looking at the future direction of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, the SHIP. Members may be aware that following an internal audit review of the affordable housing programme last year, one of the recommendations was to look at the focus of the SHIP on an annual basis, and this is the opportunity for the committee to consider that just now. And as the Chair said, the MOG also met last week to consider it as well. But just to give a wee bit of background for the committee's benefit, the SHIP has been in place since 2006-2007, and in that time the focus has changed from one thing to another, depending on a range of circumstances, particularly strategic circumstances. At the start of the SHIP, in the early years of it, the focus was very much on the Stornoway area, because that was one of the key targets of the stock transfer, to try and address the substantial waiting lists in the Stornoway area. And right about that time, there was about 1,000 people on the waiting list for the greater Stornoway area. As the programme developed, the focus remained largely on the town of Stornoway until 2017, where the College took a decision to focus on rural areas. And this is largely driven by supporting fragile communities through the provision of housing, but also using the economic benefits that new build housing could bring to a community. So with a wee bit more information, background information, the members will recall that the islands are divided into two housing market areas. We have the Stornoway housing market area, which covers the old Stornoway borough, plus the districts of Point and most of Broad Bay up to Gress. And the rest of the islands are classified as rural housing market area, which covers the rest of rural Lewis, Harris, Uist and Barra. Like I mentioned, the focus recently has been on the rural housing market area, and there was an aspirational target that 55% of all new affordable houses should be built in that area, with the 45% remainder being built in Stornoway. So there are a range of issues for the committee to consider in looking at changing the rural-urban split, and they're set out in section 8.8 of the report. And section 8.6 of the report sets out the funding that's available from the Scottish Government for affordable housing, and you'll see that's broken down to round about between 8.3 and 8.5 million over the next 3 years for affordable housing. At present, one of the things we have noticed is there's been a focus on developing in rural areas, but it is taking a long time to get sites ready for development. There's a lot more of a lead-in time required in identifying the sites. You've got issues to deal with, such as removing land from crofting tenure, which can take a long time. Plus, we have also noticed that a lot of the sites we have carried out feasibility studies on have been unsuitable, either through the rock conditions, peat conditions, flood risk, for example. So that has made the process a lot longer to identify sites. But saying that, HSP have developed rural sites over the last 5 years, as well as the ones in Stornoway. The kind of issues that we've highlighted in the report, it really comes down to the committee's desire whether to maximise the money that's available from the Scottish Government or to keep the focus on rural areas. And following the discussions at the MOG, there was a view that we should try to see if we can maximise the drawdown over the next 3 or 4 years. We don't know what the funding will be beyond that. We're still waiting to see what likely levels of funding will be available, and there is the chance that funding might drop after this current period that we know about. So it's be useful for the members to consider things like that, plus also the benefits to fragile rural communities, how important rural housing is in supporting these communities. At the moment, we do know there are several sites in and around Stornoway that could be developed pretty quickly, and that would help eat up some of the funding that's available. And we know that there are a number of contractors are ready and waiting if the opportunity arose. If the decision was taken to focus on Stornoway, just remind members that there is the Rural and Islands Housing Fund, which is a separate funding pot to the resource planning assumption money we get direct from the Scottish Government. And that is aimed at community bodies to try and see if they'd be able to develop housing opportunities in their area. And at the moment, there are several currently in the mix with the Scottish Government, and hopefully they would have a positive impact on rural communities as well. So that programme is up and running, even if the focus was directed towards the Stornoway area. And we also have the Empty Homes project. Again, we have focused that on rural areas as well to try and see if we can maximise opportunities there. So, Chair, that was the kind of discussion points the committee may want to consider over the next few minutes to see what the most appropriate option would be. But just going back to the discussion at the MAG, it was a very good discussion, quite a long and detailed discussion. And the view there was that it's an opportunity to draw down a substantial amount of money over the next couple of years. So we're not, in the report, we're not asking for you to consider a new percentage split. At the moment it's 55-45. It's really just to consider the direction of travel. It could be, for example, that there's no actual target set. It's just left as flexible as possible so that we can take advantage of any opportunities that arise, whether these are in Stornoway and the surrounding area or in rural areas. Or members might wish to rejig the ratio if they would like. But that's the purpose of the report, just to make members aware that we've been tasked with reviewing the split of affordable housing on an annual basis. And this report sets up some of the considerations that the members might want to take on board when they discuss this. Be happy to take any questions members might have, Chair.
Thank you. And before we continue, I understand the translation isn't being picked up. The Gaelic translation has been picked up online. So for that reason, I will to the relief of many of you, I will revert to English, and we'll continue the meeting with that. So thank you, Ian, for that comprehensive report. I wasn't able to attend the MOG myself, but I do understand it was a good discussion there. Online, I've got Councillor Gordon Murray and I don't know who, and Angus McCormick. So Councillor Murray first and then Mr. McCormick.
Many thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon to you and the committee. It was basically on the point of the HMAs. And I noticed on 6.3 that the HMAs do not meet the criteria for being a functioning HMA. And on 7.5 of the report, it says that if the HMAs were to just solely incorporate the two Stornoway areas, then the split would be 60-40 rural Stornoway. Now, I wanted to ask, and sorry, I had a phone call at the start of the meeting. Has there been any moves to speak to the...
I haven't got any translation, but...
Angus.
Oh, I apologise, sorry.
You have to put your mic off. Gordon, carry on.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to ask, has there been any moves to address this change to, I don't know if Community Scotland is the current agency, but has there been any moves to address changing this HMA? Because I think this would help in the short term. It's obviously not a long-term issue. And if not, should we not be making a strong case for changing these ASAP? So thanks a lot, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Watson, but we have been engaging with the government for over a long period now, trying to get some more flexibility into how we're able to use this money and target it more freely. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's a really good point about the current makeup and the current shape of the HMAs. It is something we are looking at. You'll be aware that we're developing the next local housing strategy. One of the things we're keen to explore in that is making the Stornoway housing market area purely Stornoway. Basically, the two council wards that make up the town just now. We think there's merit in having that as the Stornoway housing market area, so that way it doesn't discriminate against the rural districts that are within the Stornoway housing market area at the moment, Point and Broad Bay, for example, because that did limit development in these areas in the early days of the current rural-urban split. So we're hoping to have that as a discussion point in the local housing strategy, and that will involve consultation with our partners as well as with the Scottish Government. And I think it would be something that we'll be looking at over the autumn, and we'll take that back to this committee chair as the local housing strategy gets further developed.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
May I
Watson?
come back? May I come
Yes.
back, Chair?
Yes, Mr. Murray.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Watson, for that response. And I agree with the action taken, but I'm looking to see if there's stronger political representation on this issue as soon as possible. What I would suggest is maybe that yourself, Chair, and maybe the leader meet with the appropriate agency involved and get these HMAs changed ASAP. Would that be something that would be feasible for yourself, Chair, and the leader? Because I think this, as a short-term measure, would really help in us using the monies. Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to continue to have dialogue with the Scottish Government and interested and relevant agencies, obviously, and we'll continue to do that in terms of how we're able, like I said at the start, we need more flexibility, and the better flexibility we have, the more chance we're going to be able to spend all this money across the housing market. Mr. Watson wants to come in again.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I should have said we wouldn't need to seek permission from the Scottish Government to change the HMAs. That's something within our power now, as long as it's tied in with the development of the local housing strategy. So we wouldn't necessarily need to make representations. We could just keep the Scottish Government colleagues in Inverness informed of the process and come to that decision.
Okay.
Chair, sorry, can I come back again? So,
Yes.
sorry, thanks for your indulgence. So, if it's within our power to change the HMAs, and it's stated in this report that this is, an issue, what do we have to do, Mr. Watson, to change it? Is it this committee, or is it the council, or is it an operational matter? Because we should be doing it ASAP, I think. Do you need direction or a decision from this committee? Because I'm sure the committee, having read the report, would agree that these HMAs would need to be changed. I'm sorry, I'm assuming that, but obviously I'll hear other views. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. It would be done through the normal process of developing the local housing strategy. This would be one of the areas we'll be looking at to review as part of the work that goes into the local housing strategy. So it could be done fairly quickly. At the moment, we are looking at having a working draft of the local housing strategy ready by the end of the year. Now, there's certain stages we have to go through in developing the local housing strategy. And a major part of that is consultation with partner agencies. So we'd expect that to happen later in the summer, early autumn. So anytime between the autumn and the end of the year, I think that'd be an opportunity to take a pretty well-developed local housing strategy back to committee. And that would probably be the best opportunity to look at revisiting the geographical boundaries of the HMA.
So we can make that decision ourselves later on.
That's right, Chair. Yeah,
we wouldn't
need to seek permission to do it.
Consult with partners first before we come back to that. Yeah. So that would be fine if we can do that then when you come back in the autumn.
Many thanks, Mr.
I'm going to ask the Deputy Chief Secretary.
I think, Chair, that if I'm understanding the committee properly, they are looking to move to a Stornoway only HMA as soon as possible. I appreciate what Mr. Watson is saying about needing to consult, but I think, if that is what the council is minded to do, I think we should take that decision now, with the understanding that there's still having to be an element of consultation having to be done before it can get fixed down in the local housing strategy. But if it is the will of the committee, I think the committee should provide that direction now, if at all possible.
Okay. How do members feel about that? We agreed to. Yes, Mr. Murray.
Yeah, Chair, thank you very much for that intervention from the Deputy Chief Executive. I'd be definitely up for that if we could move that as a committee. I think this would help a lot. So thanks very much, Mr. McKeever.
Okay, I've got Angus McCormick has been waiting for some time. Then Mr. McSween and Mr. Morrison and Mr. MacLeod.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I have no complaints about the fact that you were speaking in Gaelic and I wasn't understanding a word of it. That's not your fault. And do I understand it that you're going to take the rest of the meeting in English?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. I didn't attend the housing member officer work group either. Unfortunately, the date was changed and I happened to be traveling on the new date. So I wasn't privy to the discussion, but I understand why they came to the conclusion that they did, and I will not oppose it. But I would like to point out that if the decision is made that we are going to go for maximum housing in the Stornoway area, which is now going to be a new Stornoway HMA, that means that somewhere in the region of 200 houses will be built close to Mackenzie Park. Now that's a significant development, and I understand that it's important in terms of getting housing for our local people. But it's also a significant development in the fact that it's just housing. When Mackenzie Park was built, it was built without any facilities whatsoever, not even a play park for the kids, and it still doesn't have a play park for the kids. So I would like to, I know people have said to me when we've raised this in the past, you know, that HHP don't have a role in providing play parks, but we have to get together on these issues and provide the facilities that the local people require. And I'd like to draw to your attention the fact that the local community in Sandwick is looking to acquire the Sandwick Hill School site in order to provide local community facilities. And I'd like to think that there could be a formal arrangement between that group and the council and HHP in terms of making sure this new development will include all the type of facilities that a huge development like that would require. Is there anybody who can give me a kind of reassurance in that regard?
Could we perhaps further discuss this at the housing MOG? Would that be okay if we could put it on the agenda?
I'm perfectly happy with that, Chair. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCormick. Now, who was Mr. Sorry, Mr. Morrison, Mr. McSween, and then Mr. MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the only concern I have with the Stornoway sites is that we're going to decimate our rural communities. You know, if we're going to build, I know we have to spend the money. Yes, it's good to do that. But if we're going to build 20, 40, 50 houses in our development in Stornoway, we're going to take away families out of the already fragile communities that we do have. That's my first point. But my main point is that I think we're missing the delay that we have at the moment in getting rural housing built. That is a major concern and has been since I've come into council. We should be trying to get something done to get HHP now to expedite their processes to get sites evaluated, whatever the delay is. We keep getting reports coming that they can't get land. I am aware of land in some areas that has become available through no fault of the officers of this council, but the delay is just far too, it's way out of sight, you know, and at an earlier meeting, we were talking about a fragile community in Park trying to protect the school. Now, we're going to protect a school in Park. We need to get families into these villages to protect them. And this is an ideal opportunity to move on this. Now, I know there's a park development of possibly 4 to 6 houses that my understanding is more or less ready to go, but it's still held back for one reason or another. I think we need to look at this and see if we can develop this further and then push and find out what is holding things back. And then I do appreciate we have to spend all the money. The money needs to be spent. We don't want to lose it, but we do not. I would really like to concentrate on pockets of rural communities that we have and try and expedite as much money into these developments as we possibly can in these areas.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. So before I come back to you,
I think they used committee rules connection.
can you hear me, newest?
Yes, we're hearing you quite clear. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Very good. Yes, thanks, Mr. Morrison. I agree, and I think it's still that remains a priority that we try and build homes in rural communities. Absolutely, and that's why we're seeking more flexibility to be able to do that. But I'd be interested to hear more views from members. Mr. McSween. Good off you, Shane.
Tap alive. So can I just get clarification on what we're discussing here? Because it sounds to me as if we're proposing to make the Stornoway area smaller to allow for more centralisation of housing within Lewis. That's what it sounds like to me. So can I get clarification on what exactly we're talking about?
I think there's two elements of discussion in here, Chairman. So we're talking about the Stornoway housing market area. At the moment, that Stornoway housing market area takes in the town of Stornoway, it takes in Broad Bay down to Gress, and it takes in the whole of Point. Well, you know, the good folk of Broad Bay and Point don't consider themselves to be part of Stornoway. So what we're considering is making the Stornoway housing market simply the town of Stornoway. Then Point and Broad Bay developments in these areas would be considered rural areas, would be considered rural developments. At the moment, any project in Point or back is considered a Stornoway project. So we're sharpening what the Stornoway HMA is. The other discussion we're having is around whether we want to maximise the use of the government money, or do we want to hold a prioritisation on rural areas. So I think that the available government money is only going to be with us for another couple of years. So I think we've got to make the most of that money while we have it. We're not saying that we should remove prioritisation from rural areas, far from it. I think we need to keep that prioritisation on rural areas. But at the moment, we're in effect bucking the market, because there are projects coming forward in Stornoway that we're all intents and purposes saying we're not going to take these projects onto the housing programme, because it'll break the split. So we're holding back development when we've got a lot of money to do the development. So I think that the conclusion that the MOUG came to was priority should be given to maximising the drawdown of Scottish Government funding by accelerating projects in the Stornoway housing market area, while ensuring continued development and new build within the rural housing market area. So it is trying to maximise the amount of money while we have that amount of money, ensuring we don't lose focus on the rural areas as well. Hopefully that helps clarify, Chair.
McSween.
I mean, yeah, it helps clarify it, but I fear it's exactly what I said. It as Mr. Morrison said behind me, it's going to have an impact on rural communities. And okay, I'd better declare an interest that I'm a board member of HHP, but the feeling that I get is that everybody wants to build more and more houses in Stornoway because it's easier and cheaper. But there's people who live and work in rural areas. It's not easy. It's not cheap. You can't just move the goalposts now and throw the rural communities aside. I know there's housing, there's plans and hopes. Communities are hoping that houses will be built in rural areas, and the more houses that are built in and around Stornoway means it'll be less and less attractive for these companies to go down to Harris or go up to Ness and do these things.
Thank you, Mr. McSween. Well, the fact is there are more opportunities, land opportunities coming up around the Stornoway area in terms of for projects. And I agree with you, the importance, and it will remain a priority for us to seek opportunities to build more rural housing when land is made available. But that is one of the problems. But we do have the empty homes project too, which we've been able to use some of our funding to renovate derelict homes, which is very much at the heart of rural communities, and it's been a very successful program. And I think we should be focusing on that to address the housing needs in our communities out with Stornoway as well. Now, who else have I got? I think I've got before Ray, I've got Mr. McDonald MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got to agree with Councillor McSween, Councillor Morrison there about rural housing. I'm afraid there's a few comments I heard there today, just now, and I do not agree with. In fact, I'll be perfectly honest and I'll say some of them are absolutely nonsense. Okay, what I'm aiming at is when I hear this lack of land in rural communities, the sites aren't feasible, too expensive. I'm sorry, but you know, I've been surveying sites for over 30 years now, and that's house sites, and I've yet to find one that hasn't gone up. What's the biggest cause for a housing site on the rural communities is probably your hydro. And I'm afraid the hydro cost of one house, yes, I would say fair enough, 20, 30,000 sometimes, depending on transformers, etc. But for HHP, I mean that's pennies, really is, and for the budget we have. Now, that's a statement. A question. I've got to ask Mr. Watson. I know he's got nothing to do with this, but I'd like to find out who exactly is making the decision that the land is not suitable for building on. I mean, and please don't answer HHP, because there has got to be some other professional body in there that makes this survey and makes this decision, because I'm totally bemused by it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Watson. Someone.
Thanks, Chair. Members might recall that every bit of ground that's brought to our attention that we look at goes through a number of feasibility studies to see if it is suitable for developing for affordable housing. That's good practice to make sure that we're not going to purchase land that can't be developed for one reason or another. But it also gives peace of mind to HSP, our main partner in delivering affordable housing, and also to the Scottish Government team who support us in Inverness, so that they know that any land we're looking at would be suitable for developing. So the feasibility work, it's very detailed. It involves a fair bit of work, most of it carried out from Fife and Gal, who are jointly commissioned by the Comhairle and HHP to carry out the feasibility studies. We also get information from our colleagues in the planning team as well about their views on every site that we look at. Again, that gives us a wee bit of advance warning on what kind of things to be aware of. But the final decision is based around what's called a stage 2 feasibility study. That is very detailed. It looks at every aspect of the land. It involves trial pits. It involves looking at access to services. It involves looking at any potential risks that could creep in, like flood risk, for example, is becoming something that's more of an issue. And the other thing that's relevant, becoming more relevant, is peat. Your members will probably be aware of the peat management aspects that comes into developing any project at the moment. So that is something that obviously has a big impact on whether a scheme can be developed or not. Ultimately, the feasibility study's got to come back with a clean bill of health. We have a system, a traffic light system in all the feasibilities. So if it comes back green, then there's a pretty good chance it will be developed by HHP. If it comes back as red, then it's a definite no. We don't pursue it any further. If it's amber, we do look to see if there's any way we can get round the obstacles in the way of developing it. And to give you an example, I think it's something like 58 feasibility studies we've done over the last 4 or 5 years. Most of them, in fact, nearly all of them in rural areas. Prior to 2017, when before we had the money, we maybe did maybe 2 feasibility studies a year. So you can see there's been a substantial bit of work going into assessing land for its suitability between ourselves and HSP and TIG over the last 7 years. So it's a very detailed bit of work that we carry out. It involves input from a great many partners in the process in order to make sure that the site can be developed. That gives the planners peace of mind, it gives the Scottish Government peace of mind, and it gives HSP peace of mind as well. But it's a joint approach that we take to try and make sure that every aspect is covered. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Watson.
Can I come back in, Chair?
Very briefly, please, Mr. MacLeod.
Well, hopefully it'll be as briefly as I can. I'm afraid, again, I don't agree with a lot of what Mr. Watson was saying there. When it comes to what you mentioned, services, speed and all that, yes, come across that all the time when you're building houses. Every one of us has. And look at Laxdale there. Look at the amount of peat that's getting shifted there. A serious amount of the new build out there. I pass it every day and I see what's happening. So I just find this is all boiling down to basically money. And that's not what it should be when we're building out in the rural countryside. I'm afraid not. And what's going to happen here is what Mr. McSween has touched on. Another 200 houses going up in the Stornoway area, yet the rural communities are going to get hit. Now, we've already been hit, and Mr. McSween will back me up on this. We're lacking children. And you see that when it comes again to your schools, to your sports, to your mods, it's all the same, and it's happening all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacLeod. Now, what's next? Mr. Mackenzie, that's right, and then Mustafa. Councillor Mustafa.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I've been listening to this, and I don't think it's a competition at all. I think there's a peculiar situation at this time where there is a time factor involved, and I was in favour of the rural Stornoway split when we changed to the balance going to the rural area, and you know, I still think that's the way it should be. But in this particular case, I agree with the MAUG. I think, you know, in 3 or 4 years' time, we don't want to be looking around and saying, oh, we've had a chance of that money and we didn't take it. And I think we should maximise everywhere, you know, whether it's rural, Stornoway, whatever. It's important, I think, that we make use of this money, not just for this particular programme, but in 3 or 4 years, or whenever the end of the period, they might just turn around saying, well, they didn't use the money, they didn't need the money, we're not going to give them the money. We're not going to give the money that they're actually applying for. So I think we've got to look at it, you know, from both points of view. I agree with the MAUG, they've looked at it, they've had a long discussion about it, and I think in this particular case, I would agree with what they say. And that doesn't agree with what I originally agreed with, going back to the original decision. But I can see the whole point. They've got to have the maximum benefit from this programme.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. I'm going to bring in now the chair of the MAUG, Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, I am the chair of the MAUG, and we held a meeting a couple of weeks ago. As a councillor in a rural area and representing another rural area in Barra, I am concerned that we're going to split this council and these islands. Now, housing is only one of the many issues that are problematic at the moment. We've got our ferry services with Calmac, we've got Logan-Air, we've got health services and housing. If I fully appreciate the argument when it comes to Stornoway and the need and the money has got to be used, but we could be split by by postcodes or by areas. And we have to be very, very careful that the west side, Ness, Harris, Barra and Uist aren't left behind, which is what's happening at the moment. We've got all these areas have got large waiting lists. So we have to be very careful in what we do here. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Absolutely agree. We need to use every opportunity we can, and the emphasis still remains that we are committed to maximising the opportunities for house building in rural areas. Absolutely, that's. I think we're all united in that. But the opportunities are coming up for us to spend the money, and we need to do that when they do come up. Is someone online, Mr. Councillor Mustafa?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I think I'm probably repeating what other people already said. I think Councillor Morrison and McSween and John Orman and the chair just of them out just talked about, the rural communities. I think I'm afraid, our local authority, I think, covers a multitude of townships, islands, land characteristics that they're all different. And some lands will always be more expensive to build than others. And if we follow that principle, I think we'll end up with all infrastructure built in the cheapest place, which is Stornoway. They'll apply same for health services, for everything. If everybody take the same principle. So I think one of the things that I know we need to spend the money. One of my concern is that it's not just about spending the money, because if we're trying to expedite the buildings in Stornoway to spend the money, that means the officers' time and everything. HHP will delay the already delayed projects in the rural areas. And we're talking, Mr. Watson was talking about when John Orman asked about the selection of land. I have an example in Clachan in our township where 2 pieces of land were offered to HHP. They were not deemed suitable. And now there is 2 beautiful thriving houses built on them. So I can't understand when the same land is offered to HHP and their surveyors says it's not suitable, and then you have a private developer that comes and develop it. So yeah, I think I really have huge concern. It's not that I want to not spend the money. The money needs to be spent. But I think we need to be more imaginative and try to, what Angus Morrison said at the beginning, to try HHP to expedite their processes and encourage them to build in rural areas. Because we don't want to end up with just one single ghetto in Stornoway and expanding just Stornoway and the rest of the rural area, because obviously, as you said, housing will attract other services, other infrastructure, and will deplete the services from the rest of the islands. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution there. Mr. McNeil wanted to come back briefly.
Thank you again, Chair. Sorry, going back to what some of my colleagues have mentioned, is it's the selection of sites and not being, this not being selected, or even for land banking. We've come across in the last week or so this matrix that's used by Karl Marx. It also comes across in waiting, and we see it here as a feasibility study. It's a way of moving the figures to suit what you want to achieve, and that seems to be what's happening with our poor rural developments. That Stornoway has been favoured instead of the outskirts and the villages. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Winnian. Would you be happy to take this back to your MOG for a further discussion around the issues that have been raised to the committee today?
Yes, earliest opportunity.
At the earliest opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Our members are happy to proceed on that basis, that we have, that there's a further discussion with the Moud, given Mr. McNeil's comments. And
Could I just come in for one piece to respond to something that was said?
Sorry, Mr. McSween.
Could I respond to something?
Yes, yes.
Just to clarify something as well, we're talking about it almost being an emergency situation where this money has to be spent. But why have we allowed? Why is the Comhairle been put in this position? Because if it was agreed 6 years ago that it would be this split and this is how things were going to be, it looks like to me, I'm in the door a year. It looks like this is a way to circumvent the decisions that were made in this chamber, to allow, in the end, we can now be in this position to say, well, we've got to spend this money. We've got to change the decision that was made in the Comhairle chamber. That's how it looks to me. That we're now in this position.
It was agreed a year ago just now in June at this committee that the formula would be reviewed again after a year, and that was an obligation that was on us anyway to review that after a year. But I'm going to ask the Deputy Executive to come in.
Okay, no one's trying to circumvent a previous decision of the Comhairle. You will notice this report is presented, without a decision. It was to allow the committee to have a discussion over it. We as officials are bringing to you the fact that it is now beginning to look as if it is going to be very challenging to spend the entirety of the £43 million if we keep with the process we are at. So we're presenting that to members for discussion, for members to take a policy decision on. It is entirely up to members as a result of this discussion to keep the split exactly as it is, to change that split, or move to a process of flexibility where we try and expedite whatever project we can to ensure the maximisation of the money. But there's no attempt to circumvent a previous decision. It is entirely up for this committee to come to its own conclusion and bring that conclusion forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, members have been waiting patiently. Mr. Macaulay, you've been waiting patiently. Then Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again for the report. Totally in agreement of making the use of the money when it's available from the government. My question is there plans for shared equity properties to be among the properties that are to be built?
Mr. Watson.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we were always happy to look at different tenure options in any development we're looking at. Again, this should be done in partnership with our colleagues at HHP. Your members are probably aware there's been a very successful shared equity developments over the last 15 years that have been very popular, that have been developed by HSP, but that's something we'd be keen to explore in the future. But shared equity, it depends a lot on the way the mortgage market is going. There's been times when there's been a struggle to get mortgages for shared equity, other times when there's been not so much trouble, but in the broader sense, in the longer term, we'd certainly be happy to see more shared equity if that was at all possible in the SHIP.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm a member of the MOG, and there's been a few comments here today about Stornoway being favoured to the rural areas. That was not what was spoken about at all. There was no talk about favouring anywhere. The thing is that we have this offer of funding that we have to try and make the most of. And what we should be looking at is building where, as was said at the MOG, where we can, when we can, whether that be rural or in Stornoway, because we really need to try and, I mean, if we have to turn round to the people we represent in 2 or 3 years' time and say, well, we've got £15 million left here, or 10 million, or whatever we have left, that's going to have to be handed back to Scottish Government because we couldn't agree on building houses wherever they need to be built. And I think really it's not, we should be going to maybe HHP and asking, well, can you do more? Can you do more rurally or whatever? But my concern is that we're going to have to hand money back. And then I think it's going to be far more difficult for us to get funds again from government if we have to go back cap in hand and tell them, well, there's 12 million or 15 million or 10 million that we can't spend. So it wasn't discussed as favouring Stornoway. The only reason that was brought in was because the money can be spent quicker. And still looking at the rural areas, no one's saying we'll just burn the rural areas and we'll just build in Stornoway. That's not what's been discussed at all in my view. We have to try and spend this money, whichever way we spend it, build where we can, when we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's an excellent summary of the position, really, of what the position the MOG has taken, and you've summarised that very well. Anyone else now on? Sorry, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me back in. I mean, internal audit did advise that we do something to spend the money. We didn't, we can't hand the money back and we have to spend it. But I do have to air caution again that if we're going to find that we get sites in Stornoway sooner than rural areas, we're going to pull people out of rural areas into Stornoway. Now, that is a serious concern. And I think we've missed another point that I would like to probably add into the recommendation to see what we can do with HHP to try and get things moving sooner and quicker, and what has been the delay in getting sites done. I mean, some of these sites they've taken an eternity to get from a scoping exercise to either a no-go or a positive position. I remember in a previous council, I think you were involved yourself, Chair, in this, we were looking at additional service providers to HHP. That seems to have died a death. We're looking at trying to get contractors coming together to all come and be a service provider and get houses built up quickly. I take it we abandoned that approach now. I was still looking into that. I see the Deputy Chief Executive nodding there, but I mean, it would be good to get all this brought together in a paper and a document, whether it be at the member officer working group. And it's good to have another member officer working group, and I welcome it with having one fairly soon. And I would like to take this opportunity to be invited to that member officer working group as somebody who, as a councillor who has a concern. Maybe my fellow colleagues who have spoken here today would like the same opportunity if the chair of the member officer working group would permit that. And we should have it as soon as possible so there isn't any further delay.
You want to come in?
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in again, just to clarify a number of points around what Mr. Morrison was saying. I think members have got to be mindful the strategic housing investment plan is our plan, and HHP work as our agents. So if we want HHP to do more, I think we've got to put more housing into the ship. So when that ship comes forward, next time, I think it is up to members to put in, the housing that they believe is appropriate based on analysis for a particular locality. So HHP should be developing the housing we put into the ship, and HHP will normally say that they deliver on the houses that we put into the ship. So I think when the ship comes forward for approval in September, October time, I think members have to give a real serious thought to the amount of housing they want to happen in their localities. We have been engaged with the Scottish Government around flexibilities around the use of the money. When this programme was first announced, HHP were very clear to us that they could not spend the totality that the government was making available. So we've met with the Cabinet Secretary and colleagues from More Homes Division, and they've allowed us flexibilities around going into the market, purchasing houses, repurposing houses, and retailing these houses back into the market. So we're in the process of looking at a suite of properties across the islands, all of which will be in the rural areas, which we hope to be engaging in the market with in the not too distant future, and bringing houses onto the market through that way. The other way of doing it, the government have given us flexibility around, is developer-led initiatives through a process called Partnership Support for Regeneration. So we've been engaging with the contracting sector over the past period. We're working with TIG to bring them up to speed in regard to what is required. for partnership support for regeneration, and we're now beginning to see projects coming forward from the sector. So I would hope over the next number of months through the rest of 23 into early 24 that we will begin to see houses being purchased and repurposed and developer-led initiatives being supported. I can't say a value on these at the moment, but I would hope they would go a reasonable way to eating up quite a significant chunk of the available money that we have flexibilities around. So just to reassure Mr. Morrison that the developer community is working on these projects and looking to come forward with projects.
Mr. McNeill will consider an invitation to the MOG very favourably. Anyone else? Mr. Murray?
Thanks, Chair. It's just a governance issue. Are you able to read out the recommendations for the report at the end of the discussion? I just want to ensure that the HMA is included, if that's the will of the committee.
Well, the recommendations in the report, members agree with the view of the Housing Member Officer Working Group as detailed in 2.4 of the report.
Chair.
Yes.
I think we're not going to include changing the HMAs as the Deputy Chief Executive had hinted at, to give them a steer.
Is the committee minded to do that? Okay, we can incorporate that into the recommendation.
Many thanks.
But it's really important to emphasise that what Mr. McKeever said there, that we have been seeking more flexibility from the Scottish Government on how we go about housing development. We appear to be working in silos. There's 3 silos currently. There's the SHIP, there's the rural housing fund, and there's a Crofted housing grant too and loan. So we need a more coordinated approach to how we build houses in the islands and rural areas, and we've been pursuing that too with the Scottish Government, to no avail, unfortunately. That there has to be a more that things have to be done in coordination, because the Crofted housing grant could be a very successful vehicle for improving rural housing on croft land throughout the rural communities. So we're going to continue to seek dialogue with the government and try and persuade them of the importance of bringing together all this funding, so that we can manage it ourselves, because we know what's best for our housing, our communities in terms of housing, and we know the importance of maintaining our villages and retaining our populations, and that's all about housing as well. So we'll go forward from here that Mr. McNeill will organise a MOG to take these matters forward, and the recommendations as are set out in the report.
Chair.
Yes.
I'm just not sure, sorry, about the recommendation, but can I just have some clarification? Or is that taken back to the MOG?
The recommendation is the changing of the boundaries from the Stornoway market area, but there will be further discussions around our strategy at the MOG in advance of the SHIP 2 being reviewed before September.
Okay, so there'll be further discussion in the MOG before. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the recommendations are there for your agreement. We're now going to move on to item 5, and that's planning. The Development Plan Scheme 2023. The report seeks approval of the plan scheme and draft participation statement. Mary McKeever and Hannah Morrison will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. The Development Plan Scheme, this is the annual publication of the setting out the programme of work to maintain and update the development plan. and includes a participation statement which sets out the anticipated engagement and consultation around these work streams. Under the new development planning regulations emanating from the Planning Act, we are now obligated to consult on the participation statement element of the DPS. We propose to do that over the summer, established more detail in the participation statement and report back later in the year to committee accordingly. The DPS sets out the programme for participation of the new LDP, which is a different process from the current LDP. The main focus of work in the coming year will be in the preparation of the evidence report stage for the new local development plan. This replaces what some members may be more familiar with of the main issues report stage for the LDP. As members will be aware, an integral and statutory part of the preparation of the new local development plan is the participation of statutory key agencies. And we're pleased to share that we are now being selected as one of 6 planning authorities in Scotland to take part in a pilot to support production of our evidence report and LDP, assisted by a focused key agency group. Happy to take any questions from members.
Any questions from members on that item? Important item. To agree the recommendation 3.1. Thank you. Item 7 is the Business Gateway Services Performance Update for 22-23. The report is for note and provides an update. Oh, my apologies. I've missed an item. Item 6, sorry. And this is again a report for manager to speak to in terms of the Comhairle response to the consultation on nomination and draft appraisal process for the new national parks. This report provides an update on that process and consultation and seeks delegation to the Deputy Chief Executive in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee to conclude the Comhairle response to the consultation, and Mary will speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a follow-on from the previous consultation which we reported to committee on at the February series. This consultation presents a further opportunity to refine the nominations and appraisal process for determining a new national park within Scotland. It also opens up an initial opportunity for communities to register an early interest in nomination as a potential national park area. As the Chair indicated, we are seeking delegation to conclude the response as it will fall between committee series. Happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Sorry, Mr. McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mary. You know, I note the procedure and the guidance how to proceed, and also the urgency regarding the timeline and falling between the, you know, the two CSO meetings. And I also appreciate it's of interest to different parts of the country and so forth. What I'm more concerned about is actually the pros and the cons of a national park, because, you know, it could bring in tourism or it could bring in development of some sort. But at the same time, it could also stifle development, as far as I know, but that may not be the case. So it's not so much I'm against proceeding to the next stage, but just I don't know what I'm agreeing to, because you know, is a national park a good thing or a bad thing? How is it working in other places? Are there objections to it? Are there, you know, everybody is up and saying it's great, it's the best thing since sliced bread, you know. So.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. I'd refer members back to the report presented at the February series, which actually sets out a bit more detail on that appraisal process and the criteria and the regulations and legislation around national parks, governance, pros, cons, these kind of things. And we did raise issues in our, we raised questions in our response to the previous consultation around, for example, a question that was raised last time was an area that's already heavily designated. What would be the benefit from a further designation, for example? So we have raised these matters through the previous process, which was a bit more of a detailed consultation process. This current consultation is sort of refining that down more and actually looking at the actual appraisal for nominee for candidacy areas. So in some ways, the kind of the context of the framework for national parks is already set. But happy if there's particular issues members wish us to raise that we take these forward.
You can remind me, you know, what the pros and cons were, but how has it worked, for instance, the Cairngorms or the other one, the Trossachs, Lachlan? Yeah, I mean, has development been stifled in any way? I mean, it'd be great. I remember Harris was mentioned at one time. They were talking about that. I don't know, that seemed to disappear. But you know, it's all very well applying for these things, but you know, and knowing the procedure to go through the different steps. But if we don't know what we might be letting ourselves in for.
Will I come in? Well, we wouldn't be letting ourselves in for it. It would be areas that seek the candidacy themselves. But yeah, I mean, there is academic and governance kind of papers out there sort of setting out these measures. And at the time when national parks were muted around 2010, 2012, we set up a series of workshops or engagements with members from the Cairngorms National Park, members of this the committee at that stage. Met with councillors from Speyside to look at some of the issues and the very kind of aspects I think you're referring to there. I mean, there's been a bit of a time lapse since then and a change in the socioeconomic context. So it would be for individual areas to determine the pros and cons and benefits or opportunities or challenges for them. But there is academic papers and studies out there
and
to cover.
we can refer back to previous report, Mr. McKenzie, for more detail. Mr. Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I was on the one of the original group in Harris, and I visited the Lomond Park at that time, and another group went to visit the Cairngorms, and they work on very different models. You know, that it's your own really model on how you want to governance, how you want to have the governance yourself. So each part concentrate on different aspects. Some concentrate on housing, some concentrate on employment. It just really what they felt was the priority in their own area.
Okay, thanks for that information. Recommendations at 3.1 then. Oh, sorry, Mr. McInnes.
Yeah, just following on from the discussion, I attended, you know, the consultation meeting that was held in the Western Isles, and it was clear communities did attend. So I'd have thought that if communities were interested, they'd have shown an interest by now. And certainly the feedback I got from that was the kind of things they were saying was, you know, you'd increase tourism. What's the point of increasing tourism to a community that doesn't have additional accommodation, that doesn't have ferries to take additional people in? And I certainly wasn't hearing them coming out with any pockets of money that they were going to throw. It's you have it, but you find the money for it. And I would have thought if we had interested communities in the islands, they'd have shown their interest in taking it forward by now.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Okay, recommendations again at 3.1 for your agreement. Item 7 now is Business Gateway Services Performance Update for 22-23, and Norman McLean is here to speak to the report. Thanks, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe just to highlight, and members will already be aware that it was a challenging year for businesses through high energy costs, cost of raw materials, inflation, rising interest rates, ferry issues, cost of living, recruitment challenges. And this did impact on the number of startups that did come forward. However, an encouraging number of businesses did come forward with small investment plans, which will hopefully lead to growth. And this was helped by the Coroner's continued investment in business support. Also worth noting the encouraging number of fishing investments, 8 in total, made through the Coroner's Fisheries Investment Scheme, which has helped a number of new and young entrants. Since the report was written, there is an update to 2.3. Having identified scheme underspends, our surge scheme has now reopened for a short window. So I'm happy to answer any questions from members.
Thanks very much, Norman. Can I just ask, is that publicised that short window of opportunity has been opened up again for that grant?
Yeah, it's now been advertised and it's back up on our website.
Thank you. Any questions for Norman? It's an excellent report. The great performance from the service over the last number of years, especially during the COVID period. They really came into their own. I want to record our thanks to Norman and his team for all their efforts. Recommendations then. The report is actually for noting. Okay, item 11, 8, sorry, is. Sorry?
Sorry, Angus McCormack.
Is there someone trying to come in?
Yes,
online?
Norman was before me.
Mustafa, Councillor Mustafa.
Chair, I did have my hand up.
I think Angus, okay.
Angus did, but he's drawn it.
Okay, who's wanted to ask a question? Mustafa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I noticed from the number of business startups, just with the microphone is so technology.
Hello.
Okay, I'm with you. The business startup, I think when you look at the Western Isles, we have a number of 48. But recently I had, in my constituency, I had quite a few of the young people approaching me, talking about finding it difficult to access anything from Business Gateway or access any loans or whatever. Is the 48, do we have a breakdown of, through islands of, I know we seem to register better than other places. Do we have an idea where these 48 businesses are? Are they, just for clarification.
Okay, I'll bring Norman back in.
Yeah, I can provide members with that breakdown of businesses that have been supported throughout the islands and that. Some of our schemes will have restrictions because of where the funding comes from. So, for example, with our OES scheme, which is funded by Highlands and Islands Enterprise, there will be restrictions in terms of the sectors. We can only support key sectors. So depending on the scheme, there will be sometimes there will sometimes be eligibility criteria that prevents some people from being supported with grant or grant support. But for everyone should be able to access all the advice and information that they need to start or develop their business. But yes, I can provide that breakdown.
That's great. No, thank you very much. Okay,
So,
then.
Norman, do you have a full staffing complement down here? That I'm just wondering if it could be maybe a case of people not able to access staffing directly or something like that.
I think you can have that discussion with Norman out with the meeting. That's okay. When you correspond over the information you've requested. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, but it was just a general question.
I think the situation is that we do have people on the ground for people to get information from.
Sorry, I wasn't hearing the question, but yes, we do have two business support officers based down in one in Bimbeka and one in Barra, if that's what was being asked.
Yes, that's
Okay.
what's been asked, yes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Mr. McCormack?
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't take much of your time. I just really want to say a very warm thank you to Norman and his team. I've had a number of people speak to me about the quality of the support that they've had from the Business Gateway team, and I think we should recognise that. Thank you.
We certainly do, and record it from time to time, and we do so again today. Any other questions? Okay, thanks very much again, Norman. The report is for noting. Item 8 is round 11 of the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund Strategic Community Projects. Report advises members on the opening of the bidding for the new round of the Regeneration Fund Stage 1 and seeks approval for arrangements to bid for strategic projects. And David McClay will speak to the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. This is the 11th year of the Scottish Government releasing the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund. And this particular year, Regeneration team officials in the Central Belt have asked us to submit very few applications, given that last year, I think there was well over 100 applications came from throughout Scotland. And for us as a council to consider strategic projects and to be realistic in terms of only submitting projects that we believe will hit the RCGF timelines. So we've, in the report at 6.1, we've listed those that we recommend go for RCGF application at stage 1. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Remember? I think that's a legacy hand, is it, Mr. McCormack? I take it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I want to record our thanks to David and his team for, many successful bids over the years. Yes, I know many successful bids that have been put through over the years and been an amazing success rate. Who else wanted to come in? No? Mr. Finnegan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. I just wonder if looking at this list here of the 4 projects, if another project could be added to the list or considered for the project for the Scalpy Community Hall project, which we felt was a very, very good project going forward, and is very important to the development of redevelopment of Scalpy. And I just wonder if that could be considered at all.
I don't think it can at the present moment. These projects are very targeted in terms for matching funding with the Islands Growth Deal, but there will be further opportunities and rounds for that particular project to enter the fray.
And can I just get what's the word? Support from the council to say that will be taken, the Scalpy project be taken forward as a priority.
Well, it can be.
Yeah.
It can enter a bid.
Yeah.
A bid. Can't say we're going to favour it over one project or the other, but it will enter in a future round. Mr. McKeever.
I think it's fair to say, Chair, that the 4 projects have been selected, but there's another number of projects that are coming along behind that are very, very good projects that we're working with and we're very, very supportive of. And the Scalpy project is one of these projects. So it is a good project. It's not quite ready to be submitted to RCGF at this point, but we do believe it's a good project that we'll be providing ongoing support to over the period.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much for that. And the recommendation for your agreement is at 3.1. Now, items 9 and 10 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting. So we'll now move on to item 11, reports outstanding, and that's for noting. We will now conclude the meeting and go into private to consider items 9 and 10. The relevant officers and members of the committee should remain, and I will ask all other participants to please leave the meeting now.